You're listening to a podcast from thespoilist.com. Cyberspace, the new frontier. These are the voyages of the podcast First Contact. Its mission? To explore every episode of Star Trek The Next Generation. To seek out new viewers and have new conversations. To boldly view what many have viewed before. Welcome to First Contact, the Next Generation intro cast, where three people sit and watch Star Trek The Next Generation and try and say lovely positive things all about the episodes that so many people enjoy. I'm Andrew.
I'm James.
And I'm Alex.
This week we are looking at Unnatural Selection. It first aired the week of January the 30th, 1989. It was written by John Mason and Mike Gray and directed by Paul Lynch. James, what splendid things happened in this episode?
The Enterprise receives a distress call from a supply ship. Rather than sending the entire bridge crew over to investigate, Picard overrides the main viewer to show the entire crew have died of old age. The ship had recently been to the remote Darwin Genetic Research Station, where the researchers are similarly afflicted. Turns out they've been creating perfect human specimens, whose immune system causes ordinary humans to age rapidly. In the course of her investigations, Pulaski contracts the virus and ages more rapidly than anyone else. Can Chief O'Brien fix her with transporter magic? Sure, why not?
This is what we've all been waiting for in Season 2, to better get to know the new Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Pulaski. So, Alex, what did you think of this Kate-centric episode?
No. I think what you meant to say, we've all been waiting to get to know the Chief Transporter Officer.
That is true.
Everybody loves Calm Meanie.
Alex,
yes.
What did you think of this episode?
I think we all had that same reaction at the start of seeing the first scene and going, oh Christ, it's the Pulaski episode. But, to be fair, in the end, it turned out to be quite... Actually, no, I can't bring myself to say it was quite good. It was basically fine.
We've said that a few times now, and let's not get overexcited about this episode because it's not a great piece of television. But I think with every show and every season, you're going to have episodes that don't break the mould or do anything particularly spectacular. This seems like one of these baseline shows. It's basically competent. It's all very clearly signposted early on with Picard saying, I'm looking forward to seeing my Chief Medical Officer showing her skills. But then it goes off in a completely different mission, which also requires the Doctor, and that seems rather strange, like it's something left over from some early draft. But it's important to get to know the new characters, something that was certainly lacking in Season 1. You could count on one hand the number of things you knew about Geordi or Yar. They are making an effort at characterisation and plot vehicles for specific characters, and that's welcome.
Well, I mean, let's be honest, going right from the start, that opening scene is very much, Councillor Troy, the audience hate Dr. Pulaski. Do you hate Dr. Pulaski? Well, she's annoying, but there are some reasons that maybe the audience aren't listening to. Are you listening, audience? Maybe you've misjudged her. Yes, she's annoying, but she cares about life and things.
Yeah, and then they're trying to make the parallel that says, oh, she's just like you, Captain Picard. She's set in her ways and has very definite ideas about things. But then you think, I don't really see that comparison. Yes, strong personalities, but it's just two people who are very good at their jobs have to learn to respect each other's nuances. Yeah, okay, fine.
I don't think it helps the character by constantly having Diana Muldaur in the not in the opening titles, but credited as a special appearance.
Yes, it does feel like she's not quite at home there yet. It's as if she is being tested, being tried out to see if she actually works. As I recall, it was her who declined to be put amongst the regulars, as she was basically taking on the part as a favour to her good friend, the great bird of the galaxy himself, Gene Roddenberry, with whom she had worked on the original series of Star Trek.
Worked.
She had worked with him on the original series of Star Trek. He had suggested some alterations to her costume, and they got to know each other.
He was there for every fitting. Not in the room, of course, just behind the curtain. And that curtain jiggled quite a lot.
So it was very breezy, very breezy.
I'm sure it was just, it was harmless. It was the breeze from the closed window.
Let's get into the main plot of this episode. It's a very Star Trek trope, I guess. They receive a distress call while they're on the way to another mission. They go, and there's a ship, and for the first time in the most dangerous situation, they decide not to just jump in. Picard says, let's not send Riker and Geordi and Data and all my valuable crew members into this dangerous situation. No, they actually look at it remotely. Very surprising. I think it's because Worf said we have to board her to investigate, and everyone knows that any idea Worf has gets immediately dismissed.
Why was the Lantry's communications in the opening all garbled?
Because old people can't operate technology. It's a well-known fact. They just try, they get confused, and they need to get their young nephew to help them. And they'd all aged as well.
There was a second message, but it was just the sound of them getting up and going for a piss.
One thing I found quite interesting was Pulaski walks onto the bridge and says, "Sick bay on alert." Well, be in sick bay then. I don't think the most alert you can be is if you're in a place that you're not very useful. What does standing in the bridge do for you? Great to have all the cast in the one place, but I'm quite happy for them to cut away. It doesn't really matter to me that both Geordi, who is chief engineer and comes up to the bridge and says, "Transferring engineering," is he going to do that every week? And Pulaski then, "Yeah, sick bay's ready, but I'm up here."
Well, you see, that would take setting up 2 shots.
And speaking of shots, not sending the landing party over to the other ship leads to a really nice one. They override the bridge controls on the other ship so they can see the main viewer. The darkly lit set with the corpses strewn over it. I like it.
I love corpses. It's great. Can we just discuss that a minute? Because, that's an incredibly useful feature, isn't it? That they can remote control another ship and have a look on board it and whatnot. Would that not have been useful in the past?
Would have been useful on their own ship.
That would have been useful in the past, but so many things would have been useful in the past. Remember the visual acuity transmitter, where we got to see those really great views from Geordi's visor? Which I understood up to now was the only way to transmit live images. Why didn't they transport the visor on board ship for those great flickering images? And that would have kept much better continuity.
Well, they could have made Data wear his visor and then send him over wearing it.
It's the only way to transmit visual data. There are no other means.
No, cameras were notoriously outlawed, of course.
Well, it was after they got rid of television, everyone just forgot how to work them.
First it was the televisions, then it was the looms.
We have dealt with viruses before, and it's a shame Dr. Crusher isn't on board, because she managed to determine that a really bad virus that affected the whole crew came from the holodeck. Why aren't they looking into whether this one might have come from the holodeck?
Well, they've dealt with aging before as well, not just viruses. Aging has come up several times. This is part of why the episode is basically fine. It's not doing anything out of the ordinary, really, is it? It's sort of playing around in ideas that we've done before to a similar sort of structure that builds to an ending that is going to be okay.
In the middle of season 1, we had Too Short a Season, which featured a really old man who took a magic potion to try and regain his youth. And here we have the opposite, with a middle-aged woman suddenly becoming very old. This kind of aging is certainly a science fiction staple, and you can find it in pretty much every long-running show, including the original series of Star Trek. But you can't help but think that we are retreading old ground. Did you get it? Albeit here in a more concise way than maybe we've seen before on this show.
It's competently done. It carries through. You can watch it without finding yourself checking your emails. Probably. It's okay. It's not doing anything new, but it's nothing awful. And that's been an improvement on some of the stuff that there has been. That said, I would say the start of this episode is pretty slow once you get past that element of they're all dead. It then takes them a very long time to get to Darwin Station. It's about 10 minutes.
But when they do finally get to Darwin Station, one of the things I did like was that they've actually cast old people as the aged young people. So you've got this woman saying, I've just had my 35th birthday, and they're talking to an old person, because aging makeup is hard to do and so often it looks awful. You have that element, but then you've got this genetics plot, which isn't that far from Space Seed material. You've got eugenics, they're trying to create the perfect human being, and as far as I was aware, in the Star Trek universe, genetic engineering had been outlawed due to that whole eugenics war, Khan, Superman, that kind of thing. They don't really seem to acknowledge that in this.
I think that's clarified in a later episode.
Oh.
Yeah, I think in a Deep Space Nine episode.
Well, I can't be bothered hanging around for that, and that's just retroactive continuity, or a retcon for any of you out there who aren't familiar with the term.
I'm kind of glad that they didn't outlaw it, because Sweet Dreams is a great song, and I think it would really be an injustice to outlaw it. Sorry, I switched off there. We were talking about the Eurythmics, weren't we?
Yes, we were.
Ah, good.
There's a lot of talking. There's a lot of Pulaski trying to convince Picard to let her do experiments. In some ways, I don't mind that. I do quite like a bit of character stuff. And we did say in the first season, I mean, we said there's no conflict. The characters all get on. And it's so exciting when a character who actually has something interesting about them comes on board. And we liked that. But I can't put my finger quite on why Pulaski doesn't work, because she does rub the characters up the wrong way, but there's also the implication, or that we're supposed to take to her, that we should be taking her side and seeing her point of view, and there's no evidence to support that. There's nothing to get behind. You can't really sympathise, and this episode is trying to mitigate that.
You know what I think doesn't help it here is, well, it's two parts. The first part is, just because of the nature of the show, you know that once they take that child out of the plastic film, you know that the disease is going to spread, just because dramatically that's what has to happen. So you're not really fully ever on her side of freeing them, because you know what's going to happen. And I think the other element is, well, I mean, I don't know about you lot, but I didn't really care about the children. I'm not sure whether that's just me being cold-hearted, but we don't ever hear from any of them. We don't spend any time with them until they're freed. The only people that we see are the people who've been aged on Darwin Station, or the people that are dead at the start. I think, you don't really care about the children because of that. You probably care more about the people at the start, to be honest with you, the ones that are dead.
We're told the children will die.
Yeah, and in some ways, wouldn't it have been better if they'd actually just used children? hopefully, as human beings, we have a lot more sympathy for innocent children placed in a situation. Here we've got these grown adults who seem to be attending some kind of playgroup, and they're experiments. You're almost not aware that they're aware. Basically, to save money on them having to use a line, they have telepathic powers. Isn't that good? So you can just be an extra. Don't worry, we're not going to pay you.
That's it, darling. If you can just smile in the scene. That's it. Smile and nod. Smile and nod. Smile and nod. Don't say anything! Smile and nod. Smile and nod. Lovely.
They were originally supposed to be naked, weren't they?
Well, why does that not surprise me? Was this Mr. Roddenberry?
I just thought you guys in the costume department might like a little help. I've come in with some suggestions. I always did this on the old show. I always helped improve the costumes. Take the hemline up a little there, lower the top a little there. But now in the modern 80s, why don't we just have everyone naked? We had them not wearing very much in Justice. That was great. Everyone likes that episode. So less is more.
Pulaski has been a heartless, unlikable bigot. They're trying to make her compassionate, but the way that they're doing that is by making Picard overly pernickety about regulations. So they're basically taking a character who we like, making him a bit worse, in order to make a character we don't like slightly better.
I suppose in some ways it's all about perspectives. We're seeing Picard from, say, her point of view, and she thinks he's obsessed with regulations. Maybe he is, when we're used to seeing him being the bold decision maker. But we've sort of got Troy in the middle to say everyone's actually excellent. Everyone's great. You should like all these people. The way they do try to get us to sympathise with the disease and for the crew to take any action is to give Pulaski the disease. But if that's what the episode's about, they do it very late in the day. To actually have that in the episode, and then because she was in a shuttlecraft, it's accelerated with her and goes much faster. That seems like they've just not plotted out the episode particularly well.
Also, thinking of that shuttlecraft, so Data goes aboard, and it's fine because Data can come back onto the ship because he's not human and can't contract the disease and whatnot. Well, two things there. One, Data may not be alive, but surely you don't have to be alive to bring the bacteria or whatever you want to class it as back with you. Surely you could be contaminated.
I imagine, I don't know this, but I imagine even the hull of a starship could contract some kind of weird space bacteria or something like that.
And two, even if that's the case and whatnot, why couldn't they just beam him off the ship once he gets them to where they need to be? Why did he have to stay there after the child was opened?
If Data is immune, and we don't know that because we have seen Data with the Psi 2000 virus, that was established then. He is perfectly capable of getting viruses of whatever kind.
But let's not talk about that scene with Chassuyar so much.
She wasn't in this episode, was she? What?
In that case, let's say, yeah, he's a machine, he can't contract the disease. In that case, why not send him out to do the examination? He has a way with computers, he has an encyclopedic knowledge. Surely he probably has medical knowledge as well, and could carry out any tests and scans that are necessary.
I think you're being overly negative. That's what I think.
Oh, sorry, I started so brightly.
You know what they should have done there? To make people like Pulaski a bit more, instead of having her have this crazy plan to go out in a shuttlecraft, she should have got Data to help her take the child onto the shuttlecraft without consulting Picard, so that we kind of think, okay, Pulaski and Data are working together on this to help the Darwin station. So it would have made us like Pulaski a bit better, make us think that, you know, she's working with Data and, you know, she's not so evil after all, and she's only putting herself on the line. That would have been better, and it would have made sense then.
Yeah, no, I'd go with that. I mean, you still get the element of she's risking her life and it's softening the character, and that's the episode's strength. And let's be clear, we are being negative, but we just tend to pick up on these things. Overall, it's not bad. It's just that it has slight problems like that. That would obviously help it. And just, well, things like the fact that once she is aged and you know she's got the disease and whatnot and she's going to stay on the station to die, the minute that thing comes up of, well, we found a solution with the transporter, you just know that they're going to do it because they've suggested it, and you know that that's what's going to happen. But it's played out as a big suspense thing. Will they manage to do it on time? Well, yes. Yes, they will. And the next 15 minutes, I know what's going to happen.
I absolutely hate that. I'm skipping ahead a bit to the end of the episode where they've got the suspenseful transporter beam in. And they do it all the time. You know, a ship's blown up and have they got the main cast members back on board ship? Oh yes, of course they have.
Yeah, what do we make of that transporter solution? It says, this has never been attempted before. I mean, we do keep a pattern of everyone's DNA. It's normally just used for security records, but we can't actually do anything about that. I mean, we couldn't say take someone who'd been turned into an energy creature and bring them back via the transporter. We definitely couldn't do that. P for Pulaski.
Just when I thought you couldn't make that any worse.
So, do you have a problem with that? I mean, I think they actually did work through it. They did make an effort. They didn't just say, we can use the transporter. There was a lot of chat around it.
I mean, it was a lot of technobabble, wasn't it? Unnecessary technobabble just to make it sound as if there was some backing to it. I mean, I suppose it made it less throwaway, but as we've said, once it comes up, you know what's going to happen. Now, they try and inject something into it by having that element of, well, we don't have a record of her, what do we do? But even then, they sort of play their hand too early with the thing of, well, maybe we can find some of her DNA in her quarters.
Of course you can.
Exactly. You'd have been better off just playing that a bit later. By saying it early, you signpost what's going to happen, and we can guess they're going to find something in the quarters. It just means that we're guessing the outcome of another scene. And we know that they're going to find the hairbrush. We know what's going to happen with that. We know that they're going to try and replicate her from some of her cells that they find on the hairbrush. Which is ludicrous, of course. A woman made of dandruff? That'll never work. The first time she takes a shower with medicated shampoo, she'll disappear.
Why doesn't Sickbay have a record of her DNA?
Because it was being transferred and it had gone via Starfleet command and hadn't reached there yet. Because they don't have subspace, clearly. I mean, they can't transmit data and messages right to Earth if they wanted to. I mean, we've never seen any examples of that. So records are shipped in a big crate. They go from ship to ship, and if they're passing, you know, they just happen to go there. That's fine. I think we can perfectly accept that. The other thing with Pulaski's records is she hates to use a transporter. Do you know what other doctor hated to use a transporter?
Dr. Shipman?
Dr. Spock?
No. It was Dr. McCoy, the chief medical officer on the Enterprise under the command of Captain Kirk. And it just seems like they're trying to beat us over the head with, she's just like Dr. McCoy, but a woman. You all loved Dr. McCoy, didn't you? And she has these same traits. And I guess a general audience might not pick up, but I'd imagine a lot of the audience are Star Trek fans, and they'd go, huh, McCoy hated the transporter, and then you just go, oh, well, this is lazy, give her her own traits and her own personality, and stop trying to force me to like her, because by doing that, you actually make me like her less.
In the resolution, do they ever establish how they can't just use the transporter to keep everybody young forever?
No.
No, don't ask that question.
Wesley could be 14 forever?
From that, it's a bit technobabble. Cole Meany gets a lot more lines, and I think he gets a name for the first time. He was once Con, then he was Transporter Chief, now he is Chief O'Brien. So that's nice. What did you think of him? I actually think he seems to display a lot more personality than, say, we got from Geordie in the entire first season.
You were talking about Pulaski sort of being in they're trying to fit her into the McCoy mould. O'Brien at this stage is sort of, well, I don't know, maybe it's just me. He seems to be being put into the Scotty mould, right down to the little quips.
I would say so. You've got a Celtic, slightly overweight man.
I think that snug outfit would not look good on many people.
In a slightly too tight jumpsuit, standing at the transporter with the occasional quip, and no matter what, he can get the job done. In some ways, you'd think, well, you could have made him chief engineer quite comfortably. But then Geordie wouldn't have had anything to do, unlike, all the stuff he gets to do. Like He tells Pulaski that she can use the shuttle. Yeah.
Also, you don't want to be making him into too big a role. You don't want to be putting Geordie out of work, because we've already got a television show with Geordie's out of work, and it's written by Alan Bleasdale. We have picked about the holes of the episode and some of the things that drag it down a bit, but perhaps we should just discuss the things that are quite good about it and the things that do work, and why it sort of levels out ultimately as just a sort of episode.
High praise indeed.
Well, I mean, I think exploring the idea about genetics is fertile ground. I may not necessarily agree entirely with the line they're going down, which sort of seems to give a message of any work with genes is bad. But, it's a good area to work in for stories. Having a story where Pulaski has to become a bit more humble and realise that she was wrong, and deal with her own mortality because of it, that's all good stuff, basically. And
the makeup, amazing. I thought she was an old woman.
They really nailed it from that opening scene. Yeah.
The purposes of this podcast in some ways are to nitpick, because basically we need to say things. But solid enough. I would say progress, if this is the sort of standard of episode we're getting, fine, fairly watchable. Put it on in the background. Yeah, okay. So, has anyone else got anything else to say on Quickfire?
Quickfire.
So Pulaski's last ship was called the Repulse. I'm just putting that out there. I think that needs no further comment.
This episode not dissimilar to the Deadly Years from the original series, where McCoy gets old.
He was old anyway.
To be fair, in that episode, all of them age. So it's not a complete rip-off.
Can someone explain to me why Patrick Stewart insists on pronouncing the word stasis as stasis?
Because that is how Shakespeare wrote it, and how it's pronounced by the RSC.
And I would not recommend watching this episode on Blu-ray. There is far too much detail in Pulaski's face.
And then they put all that makeup on her. originally there was going to be a character called Rena in this episode, whose great beauty caused her fellow crew members to suffer a number of comic mishaps. Wow, was that another note from on high? I wonder. Instead, Geordie got to work with Chief O'Brien, which seems fair. He loses a romantic interest and gets Chief O'Brien.
Considering the Beagle connection, I thought Darwin Station was mysteriously absent of dogs. There's no puppy room. I mean, is Star Trek turning into a sort of canine version of Logan's Run? Because I've never seen full-grown dogs.
So that brings us to the end of another episode of First Contact. Please do join us again next time when we will be discussing A Matter of Honour. But for now, goodbye.
Goodbye.
Goodbye. He was there for every fitting. Not in the room, of course, just behind the curtain. And that curtain jiggled quite a lot.
So it was very breezy, very breezy.
I'm sure it was harmless. It was the breeze from the closed window.
The Desilu Studios were notorious for breeziness.
Well, I mean, no, you hear all those stories. You hear all those stories about how windy it was. And about how it would just literally knock people over. And that's where all of those stories about Gene being blown off on set come from.